You're locked into Faith Under the Lights, the podcast where we spotlight athletes who are unashamed of the gospel and living boldly for Christ. I'm your host, Nolan Valenti, and together we will dive into powerful testimonies and stories of faith, courage, and perseverance. If you're ready to be inspired and challenged in your own walk with Christ, then you're in the right place. Make sure to like, follow, and share this podcast so others can hear these incredible stories of faith in action. Faith Under the Lights. Let's get started. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Faith Under the Lights. It's a podcast where faith and sports collide. We're on episode 4, so thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for following. I want to talk a little bit about today. I want to talk a little bit about what I saw Game 1 of the World Series. I'm sure everybody else saw it. You saw Freddie Freeman. Who hadn't been a fan of Freddie Freeman lately? The guy's on a complete tear right now. And I think he's just broken the World Series record for most consecutive World Series games with a home run with 6. And but in Game 1, he hit the walk-off grand slam to win the game, for the Dodgers over the Yankees. And when he touched home plate, he ran and found his dad, and that was pretty refreshing to see. And they interviewed him after the game, and he really. He thanked his dad for just about everything that he's done for him. Said things like, all the BP that he's thrown me, all the time that he's put in, all the effort. His love for the game was translated into Freddie's love for the game. He said he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for his father. And, he just wanted to share that moment with him. And he said that was his dad's moment. And so I thought that was pretty cool. And I got to thinking about that and just thinking about, our fathers and our parents and what kind of efforts they put into sports and what we, me as a father, what I do for my kids and their sports. And I started thinking a lot about the flip side of that. What happens on those car ride home, on the car ride home when you're coming home from your kid's game and they didn't necessarily perform up to expectations of what you were thinking they were capable of doing, or how you thought the game should have went, or if whatever just didn't meet your expectations. I know that from experience, just being a parent of kids that play sports, especially early on in my parenting, those car rides home, the car ride home they were brutal for my kids sometimes. I just didn't know the proper way to respond to that, and I thought that would be a good topic to discuss today. And so, it happens. It happens a lot, but if we don't watch out, it can really shape the way our kids feel about us, or the way the kids feel about themselves, the way they feel about other people. And so, if you've ever felt frustration or anger, when your child didn't perform the way that you expected, you're not alone. It happens to the best of us. But why does this happen? And how can we approach it with grace? And so I want to talk about a couple reasons why I think these things happen. And look, this is a lot of it's going to be my opinion. And so I don't have any factual evidence on this stuff. This is just kind of the things that I've noticed as I've been a coach. Like I said, I've been coaching since I was 18 years old, and I'm 43 now, so you do the math. And I've coached several different levels. I've also been a parent for a long time. I've got a 20-year-old son, and I got a 10-month-old son, and everything in between. So, I've been around it for quite a while. And so these are just some of the things that I think, and I'll give you 3 of the reasons that I think are the main reasons why this stuff happens. And so I think one of the reasons is because parents identify, or they tie their identity or their self-worth to their kids' performance. And I think we see that a lot. And so what do I mean by that? It's, you hear a lot of people say, oh, you're living through your kids, or, how they perform on the field. You think that directly reflects as to what kind of parents you are. If your kid's a failure on the field, that means you're a failure as a parent. And if you're tying your identity to what their success is on the field, off the field, whatever, you're completely missing, especially if you're a Christian, because if you're a Christian, if you're finding your identity in anything other than what God says your identity is, then you're really missing the mark there. And I think you really need to do a little self-reflection. Um, you know, Parents, it's either really, really high, really, really low. And you see that, sometimes they feel embarrassed, maybe too proud of what their kids have accomplished, or maybe they get validation from their kids' success. And then they, tap that into what their worth is and what their identity is. The Bible says in Ephesians 2:10, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Jesus Christ to do good works." And so God made us for Him, and that's what my identity is. My identity is in Christ. God created me to worship Him and to do good works, and so um, I don't I don't find my identity in what my kids do on and off the field. And so our kids' achievements can't be what our identity is. And so I encourage you, if you know, you need to release your need for validation through your child's sports or hobbies or whatever they do. Even if it's not sports, it could be whatever. It could be band or their grades or anything like that. Don't let that be what your identity is, because ultimately you're gonna feel like a failure, because there's sometimes, if that's where your identity is tied into, you're gonna get let down. Another reason that I think parents kind of get out of hand with with their kids, maybe on that car ride home, or even at the ballpark sometimes, is that their kids are playing the game kind of because you're pressuring them to play the game. Um, it's kids. Especially if your identity's tied into it. They're coming home, and maybe they don't really want to play the game, but you have put so much pressure on, or maybe they don't want to play at the level that they're playing at. Maybe if you got them in travel ball, and they really just like to go out there and just have fun with their buddies, and still play baseball. Maybe traveling all over the place and doing all those things isn't really what they're in it for. Maybe they just want to go play 1 or 2 nights a week and have fun, and that's what they want to do. But because you've got so much pressure on them, and maybe you think that they need to play at a higher level. Maybe your goals and your aspirations for them are not what they want for themselves. I can tie myself to this personally. My oldest, he ate, slept, and breathed baseball, and he wanted to play college baseball. And so everything that he did was geared towards that. So it was easy for me. It was easy for me to be along with the ride, because his heart was all the way in it, and he really, really, really wanted that. And so I wanted it too. And so our thoughts and our goals lined up with what he was doing with baseball. And so it was easy, but it's that's what he wanted, right? And at that time, when I was a parent, but I was also the coach. If he would have changed his mind and that's not what he wanted, I probably wouldn't have handled it the right way, because I was a very immature parent, and I was a very immature coach, and so over the years, I think I've grown in that. And my next son that played ball, he's 6 years younger, and he he enjoyed baseball. He really did, and he had some talent, and he was pretty good at it. But he didn't. It wasn't. He wasn't sold out for it, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just wasn't something that he wanted to give up everything else to go do. It just he didn't really care to play at the high travel ball level. I think the best decision we ever made for him was we backed down and we started playing in the rec leagues. And we did the travel ball thing, and his love for the game diminished. It was too much, and it wasn't because he wasn't any good. It was just that wasn't what he wanted to put the majority of his time into, and that was hard to comprehend for me. But I made a decision. And my decision was made out of anger. I'll be completely honest with you, because I was putting the pressure on him, and he wasn't putting forth the best effort. We were butting heads a lot, man, and on the field it was just a struggle all the time. And then if something goes wrong, like God forbid he strikes out 3 times in a game, or he makes an error, or he can't throw a strike when he's pitching. When you're feeling that way, especially as a dad and a coach at the same time, your emotions just tend to boil over. And so we had some really, really, really tough conversations at the ballpark on the way home, and it really was driving a wedge between us and our relationship. And so he still wanted to play baseball, but he didn't want to play travel baseball. He didn't want to be out there all weekends. He wanted to get away from the high level intensity, the pressure, and all that stuff that comes with that level of baseball. And so he decided that he wanted to he said, "Dad, I just want to play rec ball." And I had to really swallow my pride, and we did that. We went to the recreational league, which was one of the best decisions that we made, because you could see it. He loved playing baseball again. And so he made the all-star team that year, and I coached him, and to be honest with you, that was some of the most fun that I've had coaching in a long time, because there was not a whole lot of pressure, and it was more about coaching and helping kids, but seeing my son have that joy for the game again. And so I was like, okay, well, we can go this route or whatever. But my goals for him was to, in the next 2 years, make the high school team and play 4 years of high school baseball. Maybe, if he blossomed into whatever, because I figured he just caught that fire again. If he blossomed into a good baseball player, maybe he'd have a shot to go play college baseball. He never really mentioned that's what he wanted to do. Again, these were becoming my goals. And so high school tryouts started to roll around, and I asked him, I said, are you ready for tryouts? What are you doing to get ready for that? And he was very, shy about talking about it. You could tell he wanted to avoid the question, but he did not want to play high school baseball. And so that was a big punch in the gut for me. And again, nothing wrong with him feeling that way. He was validated in his feelings right there. Because it's his life, and but me as a dad, and as always being around the game, and his older brother playing baseball and going to play, in college and everything, I just felt like he was going to fall right in those same steps. And when he didn't want to, I could see that it was a struggle for him to tell me that he didn't want to. So his 8th grade year, I kept putting the pressure on him. Hey man, here it is coming up. So he went and tried out as an 8th grader and made the little 8th grade team or whatever, but you could tell his heart just wasn't in it. We did the rec league summer ball again that year, and then it came time for high school tryouts, and I think he just gathered up enough courage to look me in my eye and say, "Dad, I don't want to play high school baseball. I'm not trying out." And by that time, I had gotten to where I had to understand that it was his decision. It wasn't my decision. He wasn't doing it for me. He wasn't not doing it for me. Just this is what he wanted. And I've found it in myself to respect that decision. It wasn't easy, and I still think about it sometimes. But he's a happy kid, and he's doing what he wants to do, and he's a good kid, and so his desires and his dreams weren't baseball, and so I think he still wants to play baseball, just not at that level, and that's okay, man. And you gotta find that out for your kids. Are your kids playing because of you, or are they playing because they want to? And that's whatever they play. My case was baseball. Some people, it's whatever other sport it is or whatever other hobby it is. Are they doing it for you? And so, because if all that pressure's on them, then maybe that's how they feel, that that's the only way they can get your love or your support, and you got to watch out for that, because then that can tie into their identity as well. And just like how we talked about in the beginning, where you know your identity could be rooted in how they do on and off the field. Their identity could get tied into sports, because that's the only way that if they did good in sports, and that's the only way that they receive love or pride from their parents. And so you got to be careful with that. You got to come back down to, the Bible mentions so many times where love is unconditional from God, our love for our kids has to be unconditional to them, regardless of what they do, where they go, how they do it. The love should always be there, and so we gotta make sure that they're playing for the right reason. And so have that discussion with your kid. If you're struggling, if y'all are having those tough car rides home, and you're struggling with them playing ball, and you not thinking they're doing what they need to do, and it's just always butting heads, you might want to ask that question. Is like, are you doing this for you, or are you doing this for me? And give them the opportunity to be honest with you. It took my son almost a whole year and a half to open up and look me in the eye and tell me, Dad, I don't want to play high school baseball. And so, give them that opportunity to say that to you, because that could be one of the issues. Another issue that I see, why parents get so upset with their kids, is because everything's so expensive. There's so much time and money that's tied into sports these days. There's so much money spent on equipment. There's so much money spent on lessons. Um, you know, Fees to play on this team, fees to play on that team. You got to buy gear. You got to buy clothes. You got to buy uh, gate fees when you go to the ballpark. It's crazy. You got to pay for you got to pay to play in a tournament, and then you got to pay to get in the gate of the tournament, which makes no sense. But whatever, that's another conversation. Um, you got to pay for concession stands, and man, if you got little brothers and sisters, those gate fees and those concession stand bills go through the roof. You got to pay. Sometimes you got to pay for hotels. Sometimes you got to pay for gas. It's just there's so much cost involved, and then the time that's involved in these things is just it's really really pressing, and that's if you have one kid. If you have multiple kids, then you're really stretched thin. Then it starts splitting the family. There's been times where I was at one spot with one kid doing one activity, and my wife was on the other end of the state with another kid doing another activity, and just there's a lot of time and money that goes into these things, and we want to return on our investment, right? And so when we spend all this time and all this money, and we're doing it because we love our kids and we want them to have these things and be able to participate in these things, and it could be all out of love. We might not, our identity might not be tied to their sports, and we might not pressure them into playing. This could be all their decision, but then we put all our time and effort and money into it. We want the return on our investment. And so you could sink all that time and money into it, and they go out there and flop, and just don't have a good day at the ballpark, or maybe they're in a slump, and maybe they can't hit a free throw to save their life, or they're a quarterback and they threw 14 interceptions in the last 3 games. Just but you spent all that time and money getting the lessons and buying the best equipment, and ushering people back and forth and setting up rides, stuff like that, and it just doesn't pan out. Well, you got to be careful because you not getting that return on your investment can turn into anger, and then you start pounding them like they're your, like they're an employee, like I'm paying you for this and you're not giving me this, and so you got to be careful with that. You got to have some self control in a lot of different aspects with that. You got to have self control when it comes to how much are you going to spend on it, how much time are you going to give to it. When's enough enough? What you got to set your priorities. You got to be able to say, this is going to come first. We have so many kids that we have to limit them to the amount of sports that they can play. Because if one kid wants to play multiple sports, then that takes away from the other kids that want to play sports. I know families that say, we got so many kids that they can't play sports, and we're just going to find a different route to go, and they do just fine with that. And so you have to set the standard of what's going to be acceptable, and then you got to stick to it. If you just go out there and you just blow all your money, which you can do that. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but sometimes you're not going to get that return on the investment, and that's going to be upsetting to you. So set some limitations and do that. And like I said, you got to have that self-control. You also have to have that self-control on the ride home when you don't get that return on your investment, not to tear into them, because that's not going to help anything. I can sit back and think about all the times that I didn't do so well in a little league game, and riding back with my dad and him just wearing me out about striking out or making an error or not hustling or blah blah blah, just whatever it was. um you know it never made me want to do better ever. It made me not want to play anymore a lot. And so I think back, I talked about how my oldest kid, he got the wrong end of me a lot of times. And I'm sure he sits in the car sometimes, or he's in those conversations with us now when I'm talking to his younger siblings, and I'm going at him differently than I did with him, and he's probably looking at me like, man, you. I took it on the chin a lot, and here you are, coming at him with a lot more respect and dignity, and not hammering him. And so, but I've grown, and so I think there's some growth that's got to happen. But when you talk about self control, Proverbs 25:28 says, a man without self control is like a city broken into, left without walls. And you think about the biblical times, these cities, they had these big walls, and if a city didn't have walls, they were pretty much left open for attack. And so they would get robbed and pillaged, and all the people in there would either get captured or killed. And so it was a pretty dire situation if you're left without walls back then. And so when you don't have self-control, basically you're just a sitting duck, and you're going to self-destruct. And so you got to have that self-control. So when you get in those cars after the games, and things didn't really go their way, some of the things that I started doing was, one thing is, you don't even have to talk about the game. I know as a coach, I always made that rule to my parents that the time to talk to me is not right after a game, because your tension is way up, whether you won or lost, and your nerves are going crazy, and so your fuse is short, right? And so it's an easy time to lose control of yourself right after a ball game. And so it's the same thing with parents on your ride home. If your kid didn't do so hot, let them just kind of chill out, and maybe put your arm around and say, hey, I'm proud of you, no matter what, I'm proud of you. And so what I started doing was, on our ride home, I wouldn't bring up the game unless he brought up the game. And I would always try to give him more positive than negative. A good way to do it, the Ted Lasso show has a lot of good leadership nuggets in it, by the way. Ted Lasso does a feedback sandwich. And so what you do is you give him a positive, and then the negative, and then the positive. So you sandwich the negative with two positives. And so, if he did something bad, I would always kind of start it off with like, hey, you did this, and that was pretty good. You did this, and maybe you should have went a different way, or maybe not did that, or whatever it was, and then finish it off with another positive. And so that seemed to work a little bit. Or just let them talk about it. Ask them what they think, and then go from there. And because guess what, the things that you think they did bad, they probably think the same thing, right? And so if you're gonna, they know that they should have swung at that pitch right down the middle. They know that they should have took that shot whenever they passed it instead. They know these things. They know that was a silly foul they created. They know they shouldn't have jumped offside. They know all of this, believe me, and it's running through their head. And playing this game is super, super hard, right? It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. And so, they know all these things, so just keep that in mind. You don't have to go at them with right off the bat. Just start chewing into them, because they already know that they failed in some areas. And so let them talk about it. Let them bring it up. Let them do that, and then go at it and get in the conversation and be peaceful with it. Try to encourage them. It's look, failure's the pain is the greatest teacher, right? Failure, you can learn a lot from failure. What's the saying? We don't lose, we learn. And when I heard that, I took that to heart. But I think we gotta do a better job as parents with how we're treating our kids. Whenever they don't really perform well in sports. We can do better at that. What ultimately it boils down to, I like to think in these situations, I like to think about how many times have I screwed up and I didn't get it right and I fell on my face. Even when I knew to do a certain way, I didn't do it, or I tried to do it and I failed. Maybe it was something easy and I still failed. I think about all of those times and how many times God has looked at me and said, "It's okay, it's all right, man. You're okay. I forgive you. I have grace for that." And for me to not do the same thing to my kids, especially when it's in sports, that's very hypocritical of me. And so if we're Christians, we need to be able to give that grace to our kids the same way God gives His grace to us. Colossians 3:21 says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children, so that they will not lose heart." And so be careful with what you do on the rides home. I can't say that for whatever reason, but be careful on the car ride home. After a bad game, because it only takes a very minimal few of those bad car rides home before they decide to not love doing what they're doing out there and completely change their mind, might change their viewpoint on you. So give them some grace and have some self-control, and maybe think of a different way to approach those conversations, and see if that changes things, and also ask them, are they doing this for them, or are they doing this for you? And really check yourself on that. And I think if you can look yourself in the mirror and you're not putting that pressure on them, and you're not finding your identity in them, and then you're not so aggravated whenever your return on the investment that you've been putting in doesn't come right then and there, I think you'll see a change in their attitude, especially on the field. So that was this episode. I appreciate you. Look, put in the comments. Tell me what are you doing? I'd love to know. I asked some questions on our Facebook page about this topic right here, and so I'm looking for some feedback. Let me know what you're doing. How do you guys handle the car ride home? after a bad game? How do you handle talking to your kids after they fail, after they have a bad season, a bad, tournament or whatever it is? How are you going about that? And what did you do that was wrong? What are you doing that's right? And just think about that. Also, um, you know, this I've gotten a lot of people coming up to me and talking about this podcast and what it's doing, and you know there's some things that are going on in my community where I'm at right now, and I'll dive a little deeper into this later on, but some things that are going on in my community. I think God's starting to move a little bit, and it's really cool to see. And what's really awesome is it's being led by young people, and I'm talking about some teenagers um, who are walking the walk, and they're being bold for Christ, and they're doing it in front of their peers, and their peers are starting to notice, and it's starting to change some lives. Some people are starting to, their hearts are starting to turn a little bit, and we're starting to see it. And I've gotten a couple calls, a couple text messages. People are there was an event that I was at the other day, and people that I've never seen before. I don't know who they are. They walked up to me and told me, "Hey, my kid watched that, and they told me they want to get closer to Jesus. They want to know Jesus." Or what. There was a couple kids that made it to church for the first time, and it was because somebody that showed them the podcast. They saw the podcast, and so even the one with Jackson a couple days ago, a couple weeks or last week, there's been some movement through that, and so man, I really appreciate it if you kept praying for this. Really just trying to do what God's showing me to do, and just trying to hear what He wants to come out of this, the topics, everything like that. I'm trying to let Him lead it, and so the goal is to get God the glory and to advance the kingdom, and maybe bring some kids to Christ. And so keep praying for that if you don't mind, and pray for because I really believe this with all my heart, that this generation, this younger generation, these kids that are in high school right now, are going to flip this world upside down, and they're going to point people to the Father. It's going to happen. I believe it. I'm seeing it happen right now. And so I'm just praying that can continue, and I would appreciate it if you join with me. So that's episode 4, guys. Look, I appreciate you sticking with me. Let me know what you think. Give me a little comment below, and if you can, subscribe. This will be on all the audio places where you get podcasts, on our YouTube channel. And so check us out, share it with your friends, and looking forward to our next guest coming up. We got something cooking, and I think you're going to really like this one. Coaches, this one's gonna really be for you. And so if everything works out and it lines up the right way, I got a guy coming on with a heck of a testimony that's in the fire right now, man. And he's a coach, and so I'm really fired up about that one that's coming. It might not happen in the next 2 weeks, but it's going to happen within the next month, and so I'm really fired up about that. So if you're a coach, you really need to be tuning in. So hit that little bell that's on YouTube so you can get the reminder that that's going to come out. But look, I appreciate your support. I appreciate your prayers. Thanks for the follows, and just stay with us, and we're going to keep on trying to advance the kingdom. We'll use sports to do it, I guess. So thank you, guys. Have a great day.